Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of JKL Media. We are continuing to cover Severance, and I am one of your hosts, Jesse Jackson. And before I introduce everyone, I want to say there was a sense of dread and tension in this episode that I really enjoyed. Just it made me feel a little uncomfortable, like while at the same time enjoying everything. Joining us, let's go around the table. We have Lou.
Good morning, everyone.
We have Karen.
Hello.
And we have in the guest chair again, and I'm so happy Brian is continuing to adjust his schedule and join us. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, we are our next to the last episode of the season.
Mhm.
If you were worried that not a lot of stuff happened last week, I think they made up for it this week.
I thought this was a really good sort of set up episode. As the penultimate episode of the season, I think they're putting a lot of pieces on the board to execute the final moves to end the season in a very big, revealing, and possibly impactful way. You could feel the tension on the string being pulled. I'm really looking forward to the next episode while enjoying this one.
How about you, Lou?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I think this was definitely a clearing of the deck episode. They're tying up a lot of loose ends that could have potentially been left open for next year. We got a lot of sad goodbyes for several characters, and they're paring the cast down to the big players for the finale of next episode, which I understand is going to be like 76 minutes long.
Ooh, that's great. Karen, how about you?
Lovely. Yeah, I enjoyed this episode. I was sad at parts of this episode. I cheered at parts of this episode. And then, like you said, there were some very unsettling passages. So it went through the gamut of stuff for me. But all in all, a solid outing, as they say.
Yeah, I was thinking how to discuss this, and I made our notes. And as always, Helena and Helly, always interesting to me to watch. That morning routine was like 0 Day. I just watched, we binged yesterday, the Robert De Niro
Oh, you
series.
binged it, eh? Well,
Yeah, we just watched all 6 episodes yesterday and really enjoyed. But one of the scenes is Robert De Niro's the former president. He swims every morning. And then I've never seen someone eat a hard-boiled egg so precisely. And that plate was really strange. Karen, let's start with you. Any thoughts about her morning ritual with her father sitting there sipping coffee and judging her?
Was it coffee?
Could be tea.
so
Okay. I know it was the square
Yeah,
pot.
yeah, it looked really thick, and I was suspicious as to what that was. But morning coffee, I'm putting that in air quotes. That sequence was, it had so much subtext in it. We learned from another episode that the Egans ate 3 raw eggs for breakfast. And I think that was, this episode had a call back to that. I wish you'd take them raw. And it's like her rebellion to not eat them raw. That plate had a lot of symbolism as well. There was a figure in the middle, and then a figure in red on one side and on green on the other side. Two of the main colors, and them holding someone in the middle was like supposed to be some symbolism of what that meant. Maybe that's the severed character that is warring between their severed and their unsevered selves. And then her eating an egg also. Eggs have a lot of symbolism in this show, even though we don't see them very often or hear about them very often. But it's that kind of life, birth, rebirth kind of thing. And her eating only the white of the egg, I think, was interesting as well. And so few bites. One egg for breakfast in tiny little bites was unsettling. That was, I think, the most unsettling scene for me. How about you, Lou?
I thought that the house was like a microcosm of the main Lumen office. It was a very much the same architectural design, very stark, very white. Almost it reminded me of the corridors of the severed floor. I agree with you on the egg and also the swimming pool. Water and eggs are both symbols of
Right.
life and birth. So I thought that was interesting. I had forgotten that previous Egans had been eating raw eggs, so I was trying to understand why he said that. So I'm glad you mentioned that point. So that's good.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I had a bit of a chuckle when the father said, "I like to watch." It gave me like a Peter Sellers, Chauncey Gardner kind of vibe.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so that was funny. And the other thing that I didn't really catch, and I'm just looking at a summary here, is she mentioned that they're seeing to Irving Bailiff, and that for whatever reason, I just never really gloomed on that fact. So it makes a lot more sense with the other story thread that happens in the episode as well. So yeah, it's just a very creepy opening scene. And like you said, Jesse, the tension just started to build from that. And that plate, Karen, I agree with you. It's kind of like the severed personalities, and in the middle, there's like a child. It's almost like I don't know if it's versus ego versus super ego or whatever you want to say, but it's definitely got a very Freudian twist to it.
Brian?
Yeah, it was such a great start to the episode and creepy and just unnerving in many ways. Right from the start, when he said that he likes to watch as she's eating this egg, it reminded me of a vampire who can no longer partake of food and is watching someone
Ooh,
else
nice.
eat it as he, again, this
Yeah.
is a vampire story, he drinking from a pot of blood or something. But it made me wondered what is in that pot because it sure didn't seem to have the viscosity of a tea or a coffee. It was very
See.
thick and ichory. I just felt show has such intentional shots and pacing and the way that she would cut it with the extreme close up of the plate and the knife. It seemed very surgical the way the knife would always like pause over a piece, cut down. There was always a bit of yolk, just a tiny bit on the ends. And again, that has to be intentional because it would have been easy just to cut away parts that were all the whites. But again, I just thought it was very surgical in the way it was done. And again, maybe that means nothing. Maybe it was just on the day they just shot it that way. But with a show like this, you go and you go over everything. And that just caught my eye early on.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Lost would sometimes complain, Carlton Cruise and Damon Lindelof, that there people are looking into things that they had no plans for them to look at that thick, and they go, but that's how you taught us to watch the show, was to look for meanings, everything. You're cutting with your right hand, you're using your left hand, and the tines are downward as you put in your mouth versus growing up, I had the fork, it would be up, the tines would be facing up. We see that huge vastness. And one of the recaps I read is you compare 2 episodes ago when Gemma and she talked about loving plants and the scenes of like in the sunlight in the backyard. And this one is it's either all white inside Lumen or it is out this winter desolate where there's no winter trees like firs or evergreens. There is just snow, desolate. It looks like a wasteland. And I love this visceral look. And I think everyone is expecting something really important to happen because we find out later they're at 96%. So there is no way they're not going to hit their goal, a Cold Harbor, today. And this happens to also be the day where Miss Wong graduates. And once again, I'm hating Milchek. And we'll get to it a little bit later where even though I hate him, I was thrilled with the scene he had later in the episode. But I'm going to start with Karen. Any thoughts on this whole graduating ring toss game, this her being forced to go, and it should be a happy occasion, right? You've finished your internship, you're going to college, and there isn't a sense of happiness whatsoever. It's almost, oh my goodness, I'm going to the convent or monastery and I really have had second thoughts. Karen?
Yeah, can I go back to the plate for just a minute?
Sure,
Like,
please.
I found the place that I saw a comment about it. Someone broke down what the plate means, and of course, this is all theory. Helena's plate, a child in yellow and blue, is restrained by two figures in red and blue robes with tall witch-like hats, preventing escape from the chair. Mark may be forced to continue Cold Harbor, the person in the chair, to save Helly. Also, Mark struggling to choose whom to save, Helly, blue, or Gemma, red. And when they're in the elevator and they switch between Gemma and Helly, they're not dressed in different colors, but they're going back and forth really quickly, and they've compared it to that sort of thing. So anyway, that was on the Reddit, but back to Miss Huang and her whole thing. There's a lot of stuff in here. Milchick is threatened by her, I think, and
Yeah.
also irritated because she just sits and plays games all day. And he was very serious when he was in that position. I don't think he played a single game. I do think that he wants her gone. And so he says that her fellowship is ending. She's not in love with that. She is sad that she has to leave and also worried. And having to destroy her game, that's really sad because she really liked that little ring toss game. And he sent her to the Gunnel Egan Empathy Center in Svalbard, which is a Norwegian chain of islands between Norway and the North Pole. So it's like he is sending her to, as the saying is, Siberia.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it, at least.
Yeah. Brian?
It was very on point for all of the characters. I think he's angry still that she was the one who fibbed on him for using big words and things like that. I just find it interesting and endearing that the show still finds unique ways of bringing in things like a ring toss game, which is something I remember from my childhood. It seems almost out of place in a modern world, but not in a Severance world where everything is so strange. So I just love that touch. That was the thing that was her favorite in a world that they have cell phones and whatnot and this technology, but ring toss is like their little Game Boy or something.
Yeah.
It just seemed really, I love that touch. And it again, the level of production design that goes into this is just, I love. So, I mean, that separate completely from all the character stuff happening was just, I really appreciated that. Yeah.
Lou?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that scene, except I felt I was on Milchick's side, actually, even though banishing her to Siberia is a terrible punishment. I just felt that she had a very haughty attitude towards Milchick, and that's something that we'll talk about a bit more with Milchick in a later scene. But I felt this was the beginning of Milchick's victory lap or tour, I guess you could say, because he just straddled the line between doing what the company wants and not putting up with any more crap from anybody. So from that perspective, I enjoyed the scene. I felt sorry for Miss Wong. I'm a little bit underwhelmed with the arc of her character. If this is the last time we're going to see her, I don't really think that she served that much of a. Her character was more of a plot device to further Milchick's character. If that's all she's going to end up being, that's a little disappointing because why, in the first instance, was she granted the assistant position? Based on the original layout of the show, you had Miss Cobell and Milchick, and he was a much senior person. The implication is there that you have to have advanced pretty far in the company to get to that position, whereas with Milchick, they just threw a child with him. And so I'm wondering about the corporate dynamics of why Miss Wong was there in the first place. I thought it was a good scene for Miss Wong. I thought it was a bit of a detrimental impact to her character and not, I just don't think that character was fully utilized, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm a little mixed on that scene from the two character perspectives.
Yeah, I'm going to join in on that. It almost seems to me the purpose is to show you that here's the other side of Harmony. Harmony probably did something similar to this in her growth as a character. But yeah, I mean, when as a child, I played with childish things. When I became adult, I put aside childish things. And so this symbolic, and there is a way to do empathy that this is a good thing. You are graduating. This is something to celebrate. And so it's very, and I agree with you, Lou. I don't quite get, there's been some comedy, her wanting to play her song and her cutting him down sometimes, but yeah, not as strong as we wanted to be.
I just struggling with
Yeah,
why she was put in that
yeah,
position to begin with.
yeah. So I've been going in order, but let's do Dylan's storyline all together this time. I'm always struck that Dylan and Gretchen's home is always chaotic, right? They have kids and their stuff is out. You have two working parents. I think one of them doesn't do as much housework as he should, and he's getting ready to go to work, and Gretchen is feeling guilty and shares that she kissed his innie. He does not handle it well, put it in the sink,
Yeah.
and then put the blender back without cleaning the blender or
Yeah.
throwing the stuff in the garbage disposal. And then I'm out of here. Yeah. So let's talk about that. And then we'll talk about, because both of her conversations with her outie husband and her innie husband does not go well. Gretchen is trying to do the right things and it just doesn't matter. Brian, any thoughts about any outie Dylan being jealous of himself?
I, first of all, really appreciate that on this show, they set something up where a character has a knowledge of something and they don't dally about getting it brought to light. I mentioned this a couple episodes on the podcast before, where some places, media, different movies, books, whatever, the ultimate sin for a creator is to have a character who keeps something inside and it just to keep the plot from advancing or stop it's the stupidity or the obfuscation of information that just somehow keeps a story going.
Yes.
Hate that. This show, I've seen it happen on multiple occasions now, does not do that. And I appreciate that to the nth degree. And this was that again, like the very last episode, or she had that kiss with the Innie Dylan, and right away, it's just, they did get to it. And again, it's the way that by doing that, you tumble down some more dice because it's the progression of cause and effect. And so I just appreciated that a lot. It's the whole thing about Innie kissing Innie versus the outie and the jealousy. It's because part of me is thinking some people that have a kind of a more positive relationship would be like, oh, you're kissing me, but it is me because it's me. It's just, it's a me that I don't access, but these are broken people in figurative and literative ways. And so Outie Dylan is not the soul that, and I say soul, I didn't mean to, but I guess we got to that thing where there's this debate of like, are they literally two different souls? And so, yeah, it's a great scene because it does make the audience kind of even question that. And so, again, I don't know where they're going with that. I thought it was interesting that Dylan voluntarily decides to be boxed in this, to use a Battlestar term.
Yeah.
And to be gone. And so, yeah, again, short and sweet in terms of Dylan's arc in this episode, but very impactful. They brought a lot of stuff in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta feel bad for Dylan a little bit. Outie Dylan didn't take it well, and it's hard for me to grasp this whole concept of them being completely different people. Yeah, but him, man, that was cheating.
Yeah.
I think that would be a let's get divorced kind of thing. This was put in this episode in particular on purpose because it was ultimately about Milchek. I'll come around to that in a second.
Okay.
But seeing Gretchen have those two very difficult conversations, she's so great at that, the actress.
Yes.
She knew that they had to be discussed, but she wasn't happy discussing them with either Dylan. She brings up, I kissed your Innie because she doesn't want to lie to him. She
Yeah.
already lied to him in the last episode saying that it was canceled, that she didn't go see him. But it's, hey, I don't want to lie to you anymore. I kissed your Innie for 5 minutes, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
And he reminded me of your younger self, this essentially the self that she fell in love with. And then she tells the Innie Dylan, I can't see you anymore. And Dylan made that lovely little ring for her.
Yes.
It was so sweet. And she just completely outright rejects him. So both Dylans are in a pretty bad place right now.
Yeah.
But this, of course, leads to him killing his Innie and bringing that to Milchick. And Milchick is not having the best day. It's like everything is working against him that day. And I think a lot of his mindset in this episode is because it can't get any worse than this day. So he
Yeah.
might as well just go all out. And I like that there's that kind of, hey, the storyline's about Dylan, but it also has ramifications for other characters. And also Kelly needed this kind of cohort to help her on her mission with the instructions that Irving left, and she gets left. She's all alone there, and she doesn't know where Mark is. So yeah, the storyline was much more than it appeared on the surface.
Yeah. Basically, any Dylan decides to commit suicide. And I'm confused by both Dylans, and I'd love your thoughts. Right? Like, Outie Dylan knows he could not find another job.
Right.
They were in a bad shape. And it does fit his personality that he's so volatile. Maybe I'll just quit. And then this all goes back to this overtime contingent started the dominoes falling of bad things. Dylan was happy with his awards and getting to have the waffle party and getting his finger traps and the awards and all this stuff. And now then he knows there's another life out there. He wants that. And Outie Dylan is jealous of, because I think he feels the tension between him and his wife and feels that they're possibly drifting apart, and the idea that she would share with that, he's jealous of them, which you go back to, it's the same person, but to them they are different people. So I think Innie Dylan maybe just being unwise in his choices, and Milchick going, I'm disappointed. This is a betrayal. Yeah, you're right. Just everything's gone bad for Milchick.
Betrayal in many different ways.
Yeah.
Also, when people commit suicide, they're not thinking about the people they leave behind. That's part of the whole symbolism of him committing
Yeah.
suicide. He's not thinking of his wife or any.
Any thoughts about Dylan's proposal? Which, how would that work? It doesn't make any sense. Lou, any thoughts on that, the second half of the Dylan story?
Yeah, it's the whole argument or the premise, I think, is the loss of innocence.
Yeah.
You start out life full of vinegar and the world's your oyster, and then the everyday routine of life starts to drag you down, and the things that your dreams and aspirations are not realized. I think that's what's happened with Dylan, Gretchen, and their relationship. I find it interesting that Gretchen works for 911 emergency calls. So it's like her situation is an emergency. I just have to reiterate that the acting by the two characters in those scenes was just fantastic. I love Dylan's ring. That was, again, had a Severance imagery to it, half white, half blue. And his Dylan's decision to end his life was when he's filling out the form, all the categories, loneliness, depression, etc. He was checking all of them off. And I think that it's an interesting, again, the show's done some really great stuff with the romantic triangle that I've never seen before, because they're playing like with the Innie and Outies are the same person and yet they're not. And I think at once in broad strokes, you could just say the Innie versions of the characters are the innocent versions of the characters. And it's going to be interesting to see because this one's pretty straightforward, but we'd still have to address the whole Mark Gemma Helly scenario. That's really messed up, and I don't know how they're going to resolve that. So I'm really curious how that's going to go forward. And it's just the way the show handled the final scenes of the Dylan character and Irving and Wong intercutting between them as they're going to their final destinations, I thought was really well done. And then, of course, you had that final shot with the train going down the tracks and then it goes to the corridor. So there's all this great imagery is going on. And I'm just wondering if this is the last time we're going to see some of these characters forever.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
No, I agree with all that. It's possible you might not see Miss Wong again. As I said at the beginning, I think they're moving pieces on the board in a certain way. I think Irving will be back. Dylan will be back. They're the main team. They're part of the core group, and they're on the sidelines for the moment. They'll be back in the game. They're taking a little break. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what they're going to do. So I don't want to sit anymore. We'll get to the next
Yeah,
point.
yeah, I think that is interesting what to see and do. So let's talk about Bert and Irving. I watch these two actors together and I adore what they're doing. Did you have enough money to leave? At least he let him bring his dog. But there, once again, we have this tension where it's Christopher Walken who can be incredibly menacing, and he's been quite lovely in this show. We were very precise in our language, and I didn't hurt anyone. I just drove. And we end up doing the train station and they say goodbye. So take us wherever you want to go, Brian, and then we'll get Lou and Karen's thoughts.
This reminded me so much of a Sopranos episode where they would take someone who would say the invitation was always like, come with me in the car. They knew what was happening. They knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, like when Adriana is in that car and she's thinking maybe Christopher's hurt, but the other part of her
and she knows. It becomes very clear as they're driving further from where it could be that.
Yeah.
And so there's that sense of dread. And I thought that was a wonderful way to do it. And because Sopranos was known, once you're in that situation, you know that's what's happening. In this situation, you're still hoping it's not going to be that. As far as you talk about shows like Sopranos, Sopranos was, for me, known for doing things in the penultimate episode of a season. Like so many huge events would happen, not in the finale, but like the one before.
Yes, I agree.
That was the one where like the shit really hit the fan. And then the next episode was like a denouement of things happening. And a lot of shows don't do that. But it did make you wonder, are they going down that path? So I just appreciated that there was that. And it did turn out to be something a little bit more positive, we think. I mean, we don't know what will become of Irving, where he's going. Like you, I'm so glad that they included the dog. I was just like, I think if the dog wasn't there, it's weird, but it's like the inclusion of the dog for me upped the emotional sort of intensity of those scenes quite a bit. But yeah, because it was like his life is changing and abandoning his home and all his stuff and the box that had his father's Navy stuff. But bringing the dog along is okay. He's uprooting his life, but it's okay because he's got his dog.
Yeah, exactly. Karen.
Go to Lou first.
Okay, Lou.
Yeah, the whole Bert Irving storyline was very touching. Again, these two guys are just such great actors.
Oh,
the Irving goes back to his place and Bert's already there. He's reading his notebook and he called Bert a goon, which was really what he was. He was the bag man, apparently, for the Lumens. So that's that sort of like throwaway line from Helena at the beginning that we're taking care of the Irving bailiff situation takes on a whole other import here with Bert showing up to say he's going to take Irving for a ride, and even that was tense because look, anytime you get in the car and somebody's going to take you somewhere and they're not telling you where they're going, that's always a tense thing.
I'd not thought about that.
I'm glad you just said that. These two guys just acted the hell out of that scene where they're touching foreheads and Irving saying I'm ready and Bert saying we can't. Just so powerfully done.
I've never been loved before.
And I'm
Right?
ready
And
now.
these
Like a man and his dog. I guess if it would have been a woman, it would have been with a cat. But it's just so really well done. And the reason I made that comment earlier about whether these characters are coming back or not, I don't know, like that train morphing into the Black Corridor, I feel like that's the end of it for these characters. But we'll see. My understanding is there's only going to be 3 seasons of this show, but I thought that imagery was suggestive. But again, everything is suggestive in the show, so you can really run with a lot of crazy theories. But man, the scenes between those two guys, I just cannot say enough about how much I loved watching these two guys act together. It's some actors are so good, and it's kind of like a cliche, but you could watch them reading the phone book, and these two guys are definitely in that category for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just really beautiful together. And you get the feeling of what could have been. And so the reason I hope that we're going to get them back is we don't know who Irving was working with, who was doing this, what was the motivation.
Right.
And yeah, is there someone was in his family, right? Because they were sawing all that paraphernalia last season, right? But anyway, Karen.
Yeah. The scene where he says, I'm ready, Irving. And then Bert says, we can't. It mirrors a scene last season where Irving says, I'm not ready. And Bert's urging him to kiss him and all that stuff. I thought it was heartbreaking to see them say goodbye like that. And especially after he's confessed to Irving that he was this kind of, I don't know, enforcer light, that he was the one that drove the people to their eventual doom.
I think
So
he did. I think he did the deed too. And that's why he said he
that's
wanted
why
to get
he's
severed, because
guilty.
he wanted to feel innocent again.
Yeah, I think that's probably true as well. But he doesn't confess that to Irving. He just says he drove
No,
people there. And I do
it's all
think that
subtext. Yeah.
I do think that Irving knows that. He called him a goon. I loved that. An enforcer and a goon. And we talked about in an earlier podcast that Lumen does have very intentional language. And that was, again, referenced here with Bert saying they didn't use words like that. And I appreciated that scene in his apartment because, again, it's a callback to, what's his name? Not Gunderson, but the heavy. Drummond, thank you. Going into Irving's apartment. And so this is the fallout of that, where Bert learns that Irving has all this dossier on everybody. Ben Stiller has also confirmed that this is the end of their arc, at least for season 2, and that makes me sad as well. He's not saying it's the end of Irving's story, just their arc. So I don't know what that means, because they say things and they don't say things, and it's confusing sometimes. Sad and also glad that it ended this way. You can tell that Bert really does have feelings for Outie Irving. That while they have feelings on the inside, they also have feelings on the outside. And it was just heartbreaking to see their dialogue, the fact that Irving suspected that he might be killed on this day, and then to have that kind of surprise. You can see that kind of relief in the end when he looks over at his dog. And he says he hasn't had love, but then he has this dog.
Not quite.
I understand that, but I'm saying at least it gives him, some feeling of having someone to shower his attention on. And I would like to think that wherever he's going, he's going to find someone as well. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at the same time.
I totally agree. Any other thoughts on that? Okay.
Oh.
All right. I think what we really were looking forward to is I had said I really want them to cut back to Outie Mark and his sister Devon and Harmony, Mrs. Cobal. And we weren't sure if we were going to get it, and we did. I love Mark and Devon together. Like she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear because the wind was whistling through the hole in your head."
What a great line.
Yeah, and he says, "This is a stinky car." My wife's been held hostage as Lumen. I just had brain surgery in my basement. How are you? There's no need to be snarky. We're allies now. Oh, are we allies? I think it was fascinating that Devon put together the idea that maybe similar to you, whatever mechanism makes you switch when you go into the office, that because of this birthing experience, she thinks you can duplicate that. They agree with it, so they have the whole discussion. Once again, dark. It is bleak where they're waiting and meeting, and we go. And we get I think, a great cliffhanger of what was the last thing you said. Let's start with you, and let's talk about that.
Definitely Devon's the MVP of the season in terms of helping out other characters. She's very fiercely protective of Mark. And Mark has been kind of to be blunt, he's been a bit of a wishy-washy character this season, understandably so, because he's going through so much. Whereas Devon has taken the hold of the reins for both of them, especially for Mark, and is propelling him towards a more appropriate course of action. The show doesn't hold on to information very long. I do think they did it with Cobell. She was annoyingly tight-lipped. There's a lot of things she could have said during those scenes that she didn't say. So I was a little frustrated with that, but I understand they're setting up the finale. So I was a little frustrated at times with those scenes because she just wasn't talking. She was withholding information, so that was annoying. Overall, again, I just come back to Devon being the MVP. And even though this may be the proper way to go, the characters don't really know that because they haven't been given privy to what Copel's gone through. But what Devon's doing still seems risky because is Cobell doing what she's doing because she really truly wants to help them because she feels betrayed, or does she see Mark as an opportunity to get back into good graces with the company? So we don't really know which direction the Cobell character is going to go. These birthing cabins are, that's an interesting term. Like, how often would you need to have something like that? The implication again is that these women that Egan is fathering a lot of bastard children.
Yeah.
And maybe this is something that's been true for the whole family line. Maybe that's why they've built these birthing cabins. Is this something new that maybe they just designed with the senator's wife when she was having all those kids? So I'm not quite sure where that's all coming from. But yeah, I did think it ended on a good beat. I think I was more frustrated than anything because Cobell just wasn't saying anything.
Yeah, it feels like while they're waiting, okay, let's talk. You can't go anywhere. I can't go anywhere. Let's have a tough discussion.
Yeah, except that she's been conditioned not to speak about her time at Lumen. And that's difficult to overcome. There's also, they do remind us again that everything that you speak about when it comes to Lumen is intentional. And she can't open up to Mark. Over the last few years, Mark has been a subordinate of hers. And also, Mark was being surveilled by her, and they weren't close. So I do think that it's just a conditioning thing as to why she doesn't spill the beans on him. And there's part of her, I think, that just doesn't trust any Outie. Annie, A-N-Y,
Okay.
Outie.
Yeah.
She does think of them as different. So the innie leaves everything at work. And that way she can talk to them about things that they don't take to the outside world.
Yeah.
And I think the birthing center has been around for a long time. You say that he's having bastards. I think that it's more than that. I think that it might be, we know that they were doing IVF technology. So are they actually using his stuff to implant women? And they are the ones that get to go to this birthing center. And we do know that there are severed people that go there to not have those memories, but also Devon went there. So it's that hospital that specializes in OBGYN kind of thing. And I think if you're severed, if you have that chip in your head, you can go there not remember the pain, but you can also go there as just a regular person and give birth.
I think the reason why she was able to go there is because of Harmony, that she pulled strings to get her there.
Or Brecken.
Yeah.
Because we know that Brecken has some pull.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The fact that their whole family seems to be special because Mark was handpicked to be severed.
I get the feel that this does double purpose. One, if you have a wife who doesn't necessarily want to go through the pain of childbirth, you can do the severance. Or if you have an illegitimate, they can use it for that. So
Right.
I think it can happen both.
I just think it's an all-purpose OBGYN kind of hospital.
I need to go back and rewatch when she was first in that birthing center.
Yes, great idea.
Because I remember her connecting with that woman who had that odd exchange where she didn't seem to remember her, but how that connection leap came to that somehow in that room you got to see the innie. I don't know, that's a connection that I don't know how we got there.
Okay.
But it makes sense. It's like if you have an innie, or if you are severed for the purpose of giving birth, and when you don't want to go down to a severed floor, it's like you have to be in a room where your innie would go through the labor and all that stuff. That makes sense. But again, how did she get to that leap? I don't remember, or how that came about.
Yeah.
Back to Cobell. So I found the one thing about this episode, which I found curious, was that first interaction with Cobell driving up and meeting Mark and Devon, because we don't know, like Lou said, we don't know really what Cobell's intentions are. We have an idea that she's like this, like now anti-hero in a way, but we don't know. Movies and TV shows have point of view characters, just like novels and stories. You have a character. It could be 5 people in a scene, but there is a character who is like the point of view character, because the scene goes through their eyes and other characters can react to them. In this one, it was clear from the beginning of that sequence, Cobell was the point of view character, because she drives in, you see her eyes in the rearview mirror or the close-up shot of her driving. It's her car that goes to the spot. So she's the POV character, which I immediately thought that's interesting, because she holds all the cards. And so are we going to see her? Is she going to reveal things? But no, she gets there and she's her usual quiet self. Mark's, again, playing off her, not sure what is going to happen. He is like, what's going on? And is she going to, I don't want to deal with her. And so that was just curious to me, because they could have done it the other way, where they started the scene on Devon and Mark. Cobell drives up and you achieve the same thing, where there's an untrust and there's an uncertainty about what is she going to say and do. And I have to believe that is intentional, just like the surgical cutting of the eggs. That and you don't realize it, but after watching decades of TV shows and movies, you have this expectation of this is the POV character. You don't know it because no one's ever told you that there's such a thing, but you know that this character is supposed to be the one that's going to be driving the things, and for her not to is unnerving. You're watching and you're like, what's happening? Why is this not happening the way I expect it to, based on everything I've seen? So that's the only thing I could think that could be the case. And if so, again, brilliant idea to do it that way.
They've taught us how to watch this.
Yeah. I do believe that Cobell is like the character in Lost, who I forget his name now. He was the Dharma guy who was like has finger on everything. Come on, Lost people. You can
Linus?
Linus, yeah. You'd think he was one way, that another way. He switched back and forth a million times. I could see that. Not to again, everything is a fraction of what Lost was in terms of all the puzzles and the obscurity and the obfuscation that, but I can see her still having a little veil of what is she really doing. But yeah, it was interesting. And then the final line too of tell me what you said, she's alive. Yeah, that I can't wait to go forward with that because he had to, yeah, it's a point where now there's so many characters who have met innies and outies, but the keeping track of the timeline of when they did meet them and what they said to them last is challenging. I'm sure in the writer's room, they have on a cork board of all the different connections and who said
Yeah.
what and when. That was probably a very good button to end that episode on because it reminds the viewer, this is where we're at with this character and that character and the implications of what that could mean. So again, very clever.
Yeah.
You're on mute.
I'm good.
Okay. All right.
I talked about it already.
Milchek gets called to the carpet because he's just F things up. Mark's not showing up. Dylan is quitting. Helly is wandering the halls. No one is crunching numbers. We had promised we were going to deliver today. We were ready to pop champagne and celebrate, and it's not happening. And he's getting his butt chewed by Hammond. Drummond, yeah. I think we're not supposed to like him, but I did.
Milchek.
He's horrible.
Drummond's Milchek's high place.
But the enemy of my enemy, anyway, seeing him basically saying, and he does say, eat poop, right? And calling him out. I'm a manager. I deserve respect, even from my superiors. So for all of us who have been crapped on by our bosses, I was kind of, yes, tell it to the man. Karen, you're nodding your head. You want to share?
My favorite part of the episode by far was the conversation between Drummond and Milchek. He is not having a great day. And I think this was him just saying, screw it. I'm going to assert myself. This company is not respecting me. And he's taking it out on Drummond because he's the symbol of Lumen, the Lumen that works against him. And I like that this is not unrelatable that someone would blame us for something that is their responsibility. They're outies, right? We've established that. And so when Milchek says, that's your job, that's not my job, that's your job, that's your fault that they're not here. And he's right. People get called on the carpet for stuff that isn't their fault all the time. And he's done eating crap. So he tells Drummond to devour feculence, which I love. I do think that he is calling Drummond stupid in that moment. Do you like me to dumb it down for you? Because I can. That was fantastic. I loved him in this episode, all through the episode. His assertion of his authority over Miss Wong, his frustration at Mark, at Dylan, at not doing what they're supposed to do that day. Maybe if he knows about Helly, I don't know if we saw evidence of that, but I'm assuming he does know that Helly is not working either. And he's just not having a great day. And it's been building, I think, through the season in a very subtle way, with him being given the posters and whatever to hang up in his office, that they've changed all the people to Black people, to people of color. And he thinks that's weird. Them putting a child in charge of him, them doing all these things that he feels are a slight that Lumen isn't really rewarding him for all his years of service and his dedication.
They wouldn't have
So,
done this to Harmony. Miss Cobell would not been
right,
treated this way.
exactly. Although she's treated worse. But
Yeah.
he doesn't know that. What he knows is she is treated very well. As far as he knows, she's never really held to account. He thinks that this is a promotion for me, and yet it's worse than the other job he had. And I love that scene where he confronts Drummond, and Drummond is taken aback, and also he feels ineffectual because I think he can't really argue with Milchick. We know that people that deal with innies have a lot of information that other people don't have. Letting them go, terminating them, is probably very rare. The fact that they let Harmony just loose out there, they're watching her, but we know that she's got one up on them. So I think it's very rare that they terminate someone from a job that deals with any sensitive information. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you can tell he does not appreciate what's happening there, but that he's chastised. I just love that scene between the two of them.
Good. Brian?
Yeah, I think Milchick realizes, like Cobell, that she has a lot of value, that they're not being represented. He has some cards. All this stuff is happening out there. I'll do my job when you can actually get your people back down on my floor. I like that. Again, he's one of those characters like you, Jesse. I don't like him, but at the same time, the enemy of my enemy type of thing. When he can stick it to them, it's good for you, man. Good for you.
Exactly. Lou?
Guess I'm a little surprised that as someone who's is in Milchick's position, relatively speaking, in real life, that Jesse, that you don't have a little more empathy for the characters.
Right.
It's surprising to me. Again, a great scene. Karen pretty well laid it all out. I think what it highlights for me, something that I've been, nursing especially during the second season, is as big as and powerful as Lumen is, their arrogance has led them to have a lot of blind spots. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on the severed floor that they're not aware of. The whole Bert Irving situation is another example of them not realizing the potential for what Bert did and allowing Irving to escape. And we also learned from Drummond that Mark is their most vital data miner, which we knew already. But the theory was that they asked Gemma in her episode what was she was more afraid of, dying, suffocating or drowning, and she said drowning. And somebody's saying put the theory out that Cold Harbor is going to be a drowning scenario for her, and maybe that's why, if the one piece of information that Cobell was deigned to share with us, if the Cold Harbor file was complete, then Gemma would be dead. So that maybe that room is going to be a drowning scenario for her.
I think my issue with Milchick is he's a bad manager. You can manage and lead without intimidation and with compassion. And so I think that's why he reminds me of every bad manager I've had.
That's interesting again, because he's gone out of his way to make the innies feel more like people than anybody else has. And of course, it has backfired spectacularly on him.
Yeah, I disagree.
He's a man, though.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
beginning of this season, he talked about he lied to them. He's lied to them about how long they've been gone. He belittles them. He brings them down. He doesn't treat them with respect. I don't think he's been a good boss at all.
And I think most of those actions are because he was towing the company line. But yeah, he's an interesting character, and I don't know what part he's going to play next season.
I'm sure, like the guy who played Jeffrey probably is just as absolutely wonderful on Game of Thrones. All right, so we're going to wrap it up.
Let me talk about him real quick.
Yeah.
Trammell Tillman was on, I think, Jimmy Kimmel this week, and man, he seems like just an amazing person.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, he's witty and charming in real life. So,
all right, we're going to wrap it up, but I'm throwing an audible if you need just a few minutes, but I'd like everyone to predict what you think is going to happen next week? One item, not whole everything, just, or maybe what you hope to see. And I'll start. I hope that somehow Innie and Outie Mark get to communicate with each other. That's what I'm hoping to see. Brian, do you have any hopes, wish, predictions?
Wow. We didn't even talk about the Helly seeing her
Her
outie
dad.
dad.
Great.
I think that is going to have big implications. I think the pairing of them and her interaction is going to have an effect. I think that's going to be it's going to expand out. And her and him, if they're still together in that situation, I think that the Robbie Benson character will be brought. I don't know. I think it was such a tiny little button at the end, but I think that's going to be a big one. As far as other predictions, I don't know. For the first time, I thought Gemma might actually not survive past this season because of that one line where he says this could be the end of her. And in a way, I can see that being tragic, but I also could see that being the ultimately for having Innie Helly be someone that Mark can be with. But we'll see.
All right, very nice.
One thing.
Okay.
I don't know who.
Okay.
But I do have that feeling because there's a lot of doom.
This episode did feel, as I said, there was a sense of dread, of tension.
I think it's guaranteed that there's going to be a surprise twist to this episode. I'm hoping that Helly meets Gemma before Mark does. Because I would just love to see the interplay between those two characters.
All right, let's go around the table. Any final thoughts on how to reach you? Brian.
My final thought is this episode is written by Dan Erickson, who is the creator of the show, basically. He wrote the pilot. I always find those episodes that are written by the creator to be ones to analyze and appreciate, because every show does, whether it's written by someone else, goes through the show runner's hands and they put their own final touches on it. But this one is the most purified version of that.
Filtered.
I think if we look for things and clues and ideas, this really would be where we'd look. But yeah, I really liked it. Looking forward to the next episode, even though I think it could be tragic, like Lou said. His prediction and mine are very much twined together. Last season, the finale was like a holy shit, this is what's happening type of thing. This one could be a holy shit, I'm crying type of thing.
Nice.
We'll see.
Yeah. Lou?
Well, I'll just add that for Brian's sake, that the next episode is also written by the show creator, Dan Erickson. So that's good. And it's directed by Ben Stiller. And it's going to be 76 minutes long. So, Karen, take lots of notes. You can reach me on YouTube, Lou's Reviews, where we have our Babylon 5 podcasts, Stephen King podcasts. We have our JKL Media podcasts are now on our JKL Media YouTube page, JKL Media Reviews, where we're currently doing Severance, as you all know, and we're going to be tackling some other shows after that, most notably The Haunting of Hill House, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Jesse's reaction to that one. You can also find me on X or Twitter at Lou W. Sitzma, and same for Blue Sky.
All right, Karen.
I do have one little thing.
Please.
This episode was titled The After Hours, and it was named after a Twilight Zone episode. And the premise of that episode is that there's a woman that buys a thimble for her mother on the 9th floor of this department store. She finds out when she tries to return it, there is no 9th floor, but there is a 9th floor, and it is housed by mannequins. And so it's revealed that the mannequins get to live as a human for 1 month every year.
Yeah. So that's a reference that Belle made when she said 9th floor.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a very interesting parallel, I thought.
Nice.
So you can reach me at Oliveria on all the social medias. My blog is alistuff.com. And our JKL Media Reviews email is jklmediareviews@gmail.com. Please reach out. Let us know what you think. As you guys know, Brian has been a fixture on our podcast this season, and I think he would have probably been one of our feedbackers, so it's really cool to have that as a part of this season's episodes. And I just want to say I'm looking forward to leading the conversation next week. So if you guys want to see a chaotic episode, join us.
Yeah, and I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter, X, and Blue Sky, and you can find me Jesse Jackson on Facebook. I'm talking music on Set Lusting Bruce. I am talking John Hyatt on Perfectly Good Podcast, and we are gearing up for the return of Doctor Who on Next Stop Everywhere. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Would love to hear some feedback. As you heard us all, just some emails, tweets, anything at all you could do to tell us what you think about the final episode of the season that's coming up. But for now, I'm going to thank Lou, Karen, and Brian for joining us. Everyone, the elevator's closed. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
And
Yay.
scene.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.